Hello, Finland, once again. I came here to apologise for a few mistakes I may have made in my last video about Finland. And I apologise for criticising Finnish TV. I think in England we have exceptionally good television, and that is down to one basic reason. Excuse me. And that is the BBC. The BBC makes some pretty spectacular programs. But then again, they are quite capable of doing that because they have a budget of approximately £5 billion a year. And that is paid for by us, the general public, through our TV licence, which is mandatory. If you own a TV, then you must pay the BBC TV licence, which is around £160 a year. Quite a lot, considering how much Netflix is. But lately, during the past few years, the BBC has become far too left-wing and woke, for the want of a better word. And they are certainly not impartial anymore. They used to be famous for their impartiality, of basically reporting things but sitting on the fence and not making political statements, which now, of course, they do all the time. And there are many people now that are following a campaign to defund the BBC by not paying their licence fee. And I must confess, I am one of them. And I've had several letters threatening with courts, solicitors, you name it, I've had it, along with many other people. And we are not giving way to the rhetoric that the BBC stand for. No one wants the BBC anymore. The BBC is a great institution that used to be a great institution, which isn't anymore, sadly. I was brought up with the BBC, with some brilliant radio plays. The BBC World Service is a great service, but now it is all politically orientated, and it's not on. People are not going to tolerate that anymore. So there you have it. That's the campaign to defund the BBC. And with this latest thing with Princess Diana and Martin Bashir, it's not going their way at all. Going back to my trip, my boat trip in Finland, that was, for me, that was a magical thing to happen. Something that I would have never dreamt of doing in any stage of my life. I wouldn't have dreamed of that at all. And it took me to many places, and I met many people. And some of those people I met within the realm of sailing, some of the boats had their own sauna, which was Oh, wow, wow. A sauna on a boat. You couldn't get any more finished than that, trust me. And one of my last ports of call was Suomenlinna. Suomenlinna. It's an island fortress, and I had been there. I had been there before, and I travelled on a ferry from Helsinki out to the island. This last time, I approached it from a different way. We came via the Baltic Sea, and as I say, it was a last port of call before I I reluctantly came home because of a damaged knee that I sustained in um, quite a storm on the sea. I took a fall and twisted my knee. And this last port of call was pretty good because as soon as I went in the sauna, I had a call of, "Hey, English." And it was a young Russian guy who recognized me straight away. And he said, we will go for a beer when we've had our sauna. Yeah, 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 sure. And I met him in the bar afterwards. And most people in Finland, as far as I know, they drink lager. And I could see from the glass this guy was drinking from. It wasn't lager at all. It looked like an English bitter. And I said, what is this? And he said, IPA. Okay, IPA. What is IPA? And of course, as soon as I saw the pump where it was being drawn from, I realised it was IPA. Different pronunciation, of course, because it's finished. IPA, not IPA, but it was IPA, Indian Pale Ale, and it was very, very good, and it wasn't that expensive. And one good thing about my trip is that I never saw another Englishman ever, and I must say I was quite pleased about that because the British haven't got a good reputation for being abroad, especially in Spain. Not a good reputation at all, sadly. A lot of Brits that go there don't represent England as it actually is, or as it was. It's not like that anymore, sadly. I think the last time I was here, I mentioned the Winter War and Karelia. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing Karelia correctly. Karelia. I think it's Karelia. And if you look at the map of Finland, it looks like a lady in national dress doing this, and she's missing her left arm, and that was taken by the Russians. Like Finland had to concede that after the war. Um, and it's never been given back, and not likely to, I don't think. Now the Finnish language. Let me just have a. This is I was going to say coffee, but it isn't. It's actually chai tea, and chai tea. Actually, it isn't chai tea. It's just purely chai. And when our troops that were stationed in India, when they came home, they adopted this chai, But when they come home, it was corrupted into a word called cha. And English use that now as a cup of tea, a cup of cha. And there's a little bit of history for you. Salut. Or as the Finnish say, kippis, but it's not alcohol. I don't know what you say when you take a drink of tea. It's not cheers or kippis or skol or any of those, whatever. Now, trying to cover the Finn language. I know quite a few words in Finnish, but to actually speak the language with good grammar is beyond me. I think had I lived there for much longer, I would have picked up not just words, but being able to hold a conversation. But with the Finnish language, they don't have prepositions. Prepositions like in, off, with, at, to, for, on. They don't have those. They don't have those. It's more, they have postpositions where everything comes after. I'm not sure if I'm going to get this right, but Helsinki, the city, if you're coming, or if you're going to the city, it's Helsinkin. If you're coming from the city, it's Helsinkinista. I apologise if I've got that wrong, but that is basically the Finnish language. Very, very difficult, but very, very logical if you think about it. Very logical indeed. And when I said I found some wolf prints, someone said to me, "Was that in the mud?" And I said, "No, no, no, it wasn't in the mud at all. They were in the snow, clearly visible as wolf prints." And I had some interesting occurrences in Finland that I seem to attract. I don't know why. Don't ask me why. I don't know. They seem to happen to me a lot. And the first one was a friend and I went for a walk very early one morning, very early, around 5 or 5:30 in the morning. It had been snowing. It was crisp and cold, very, very cold. And as we walked past a nightclub. There was a gym, well, there was a nightclub and then a gym. We walked past that, and there was a figure kneeling down in the road. And as we approached, we was perhaps within 2 or 3 meters. You could smell the alcohol coming from this person kneeling in the snow, absolutely incapable of even walking. And I truly believe had he been there for much longer, he would have died, that for sure. And my friend tried to warm his hands. He had no gloves, just kneeling down in the snow, hood, breathing this violent smell of raw alcohol. And we called the authorities. And I must confess, it wasn't that quick actually. I was quite surprised how long it took, but because it was down a small lane, I said that I would wait on the corner of the main road and flag down the ambulance or whatever was going to come, police car, I don't have no idea. And it did arrive eventually. And they put the guy in a wheelchair and they wheeled him into this ambulance and off he went. And apparently he was one of those guys that did it regularly. he certainly wasn't capable of thanking us. But that's okay. That's okay because I thought that was a good deed for our day. And then there was another incident sometime later, still the winter. And this time it was a walk a little bit later. This was around 9 a.m. in the morning. Crisp, cold. It had been snowing, and we would. It's nice. It's nice to walk in the snow when your footprints are the first ones. That's a nice feeling. I've always had that since I was a little boy. I've always loved the winter and the snow. I adore it. And this time we came across a little boy about, I don't know, this high. I've got no idea. Possibly around 5, maybe 6, maybe 4. I've got no idea. And according to my friend, he spoke very, very good Finnish. And we asked him what he was doing, and he had a phone. He had his mum's phone, and in the phone were her credit cards and all her details. But there didn't seem to be anywhere to contact this the mum or dad or whatever. We didn't know anything like that at all. Fortunately, because it had been snowing, we followed his footprints like a regular detective would. And we found the footsteps, and they went for approximately 200 or 300 yards, and we eventually found where he came from, and the door was actually still open. And we knocked on the door, and a woman came, and she didn't seem the least bit concerned, not at all. Now, if that had happened in England, it would have been, I can only imagine, it would have been, the police would have been involved, maybe a helicopter, total, I'm going to say overreaction, but maybe that's not so in England. That would have never have happened in England. And it was an eye-opener for me, coming from England. It was, wow, how did that happen? A little boy wandering all on his own, not concerned, the mum wasn't concerned, and we just left her with her little boy and carried on with our walk. And there was another incident when I was in the sauna in Espoo, and the sauna is usually a men-only thing. That you have a man's night and a woman's night. Fair enough. That's fine. That's just great. And we used to go regularly and meet people. The same people came, and we got to know each other and chatted and talked. And a lot of time is spent talking in a sauna. Sometimes I didn't have a clue what was going on, but it was interesting. And then one day, one of the guys who lived in the apartment above brought his little girl into the sauna, which was, I found, quite beautiful. It was a nice experience to see that. That's something, again, would never ever happen in England. It would make front page news in the newspapers. That's the difference between our cultures. And it was. Oh, there was another small incident. My friend and I were on the train to Porvoo, and that was an interesting experience because I'd never been on a train in Finland, and we left Helsinki to travel to Porvoo, and there was a great big rally there. It was a gay pride week, and that was interesting. Interesting, nice people, but and why should not they be? Um, I forgot where I was going to. Oh yes, and on the train as we travelled to Porvoo, there was a man in a wheelchair, and when we pulled into a station, and he was obviously going to get off at that station, but he was struggling to get off with the wheelchair, and I quite naturally I just went up and helped him push his wheelchair off onto the platform, hoping that he did want to get off there, but he actually did, and he looked astounded that someone would help. And that was another thing that I didn't understand. I guess some people just want to be totally independent, even though they may be incapacitated for whatever reason. I don't know. And then I think in my last video I mentioned um, Finn music only being heavy metal music, which is not true. That's not true because there are many other singers, opera singers like Matti Salminen. Then there are other groups and singers who are not heavy rock or heavy metal. The Rasmus, Him, Sunrise Avenue, Alma, Poets of the Fall, Jenny Vartanen, Kissu. I don't know what her real name is. And that's just some of their singers. Going back to the sauna. When I was on my travels, I think I mentioned that we went into a poo sauna, and it was that you washed in the lake. Well, on the way to that sauna, we passed people who were camping in tents. And they had a tent specifically made for the sauna. The sauna was in a tent. Now I find that astounding, but it was just apparently normal practice, which I found quite amusing. Ah. And of course, everybody in Finland, including if you go to a sauna, you'll go in there naked. That is the way it happens. And you have a little tiny paper, not necessarily paper, but there is a thing called a pafletti that you use to sit on the bench for hygienic purposes. And the one thing I really regret not doing in Finland was going ice swimming. I wanted to, and I was told in no uncertain terms that I should not because I don't know, maybe they thought I was too old or frail or whatever. But I really regret not doing that. I wanted to do that. And when you go ice swimming, that is not from a sauna. That is walking along a pier and walking down into the sea, where the water is swirling. And the reason the water is swirling is because there is a pump underneath the water that keeps the water swirling to stop it freezing, because it is pretty damn cold. And like I say, I truly wish I'd have done that. Yeah. And then we have, as a boy, I remember came to my mind the flying Finn, and I could never remember his name, the flying Finn. But apparently that name is attributed to many Finnish athletes, and there have been many of them. And one particular athlete that was totally admired in Finland was Matti Nykänen, and he won 5 gold medals at different Winter Olympics. Very famous man who sadly fell from grace, as a lot of sports stars do that. They fall from grace. They get into whatever, alcohol, drugs, and the decline is pretty sad, very, very sad. And I felt sorry for the man, because they wanted for him, when he died, they wanted, a lot of people wanted him to have a state funeral, and people said no, he was a wife beater and a drug addict and an alcoholic. And it's a little bit unfair, because many sportsmen do that. They go into this, when they live their life of fame, they're on top, they're put on a pedestal, no question. And they absorb that into their personality, and they think that is a life of normality, and of course it isn't. And when it goes away, you crash. And it was a sad situation. But that's one of those things. And when the fame has gone, and when your fans have gone, and the crash is a path to hell, that's for sure. And I find that very, very sad. And we are, all of us, we are granted life, and then it's taken away. No one survives. No one gets out alive. No one at all. But that's life, and death is all part of it, sadly. And one other thing I mentioned, I said it was the Øresund Bridge. It wasn't the Øresund Bridge from Denmark into Sweden. It was the Øresund Bridge, and it wasn't 30 miles long. It seemed like it, but it wasn't. It was actually, the bridge is 5 miles long, and then at the very end there is a tunnel which is 2.5 miles long. And that was an interesting, a beautiful thing to experience, and I'm glad I did. Whether I will ever get back to Finland, I don't know. It depends on what's going to happen. At the present time, it doesn't seem it's going to be possible, because there will be, let's just say, consequences. I won't go into it any deeper than that. I won't go into it at all, in fact. We have, in England, we don't have anymore, but apparently it's going to come back. We used to have booze cruises from England to France to buy their cheap alcohol and cigarettes, and then we joined the EU, and that stopped. But I think it's coming back. And of course, those of you in Finland will know that you also have a booze cruise where you go to Estonia, and the cars come back laden down with cheap alcohol, or at least cheaper than it is in Finland. I googled Estonia, which seems to be another beautiful country and not that far from Finland. So that may be an option in the future. I don't know. And when I was looking for, or when I googled Estonia, I found the story of MS Estonia, the boat that sank in 1995, and it took a lot of people with it. Nearly 1,000 people died, and because of the depth of the water, they couldn't retrieve the bodies. That was an horrific accident that I don't know whose fault it was, but the front of the boat was battered by the waves, and the front collapsed, and it just sank in a matter of minutes, I think. And that got me thinking. When I did the trip from Sweden to Turku on that liner, my cabin was deep down in the bowels of the ship, and I thought of that when I read this story about the MS Estonia. If you were in that situation down that far in the ship, and it sank so quickly, you would never ever get out. It was like a catacomb, if you like. Very, very depressing thought. And I'm glad I never read that before I went on my trip. Another thing about Finland is their racing drivers, Formula One and rally drivers. You had, I'm not sure if I pronounced this right, Keke Rosenberg, Tommi Mäkinen, Kimi Räikkönen, Mika Häkkinen. And by the way, that flying Finn, the original flying Finn, was Paavo Nurmi. One other thing I remember distinctly when I was working and living in Forsa, I was assisting, if you like. I was assisting an older man who was a carpenter, who knew what he was doing, that's for sure. And of course we couldn't communicate because of the language barrier. But I worked alongside him for a couple of days. And one day he said something I didn't understand, and then he immediately downed his tools, got in his car and drove off. And I asked someone, what's going on? And the friend of mine, she said, he said his bees are calling. His bees are calling. What does that mean? And it transpired that when he went back, his bees were indeed calling, and they had swarmed. The queen had decided to leave the nest, and when that happens, they swarm, and you get a great big cloud of bees, and that's why he left. How did he know that? How did he know that? And another thing with this older guy, when I was there, I went down with a bug. I don't know whether it was a flu or just a bad cold or whatever. And he came in the next day and he gave me this little tiny file of, I can't remember what it was called, but apparently it comes from the beehive, and it scrapes off the beehive. It's what the bees seal the hive with, this substance. And apparently people take that for efficacy, for being healthy. And sure enough, the next day I was absolutely fine. Whether that was a coincidence, I don't know, but it was interesting. And the last thing I want to say is I came up against Finland's bureaucracy. And to be fair, I don't think Finland's bureaucracy is any worse than any other. It's just impenetrable, absolutely impenetrable. I was involved in the tax office, Keller, immigration, the magistrate, the police, and it was, as I say, impenetrable. When I lived in Forza, they wanted to know where I was staying, so I gave my address as in Forza with the appropriate address. And when I left there, myself and two Finnish friends tried to contact the appropriate authorities to say that I was no longer living there. And after 2 days, it was absolutely hopeless. We just could not get anywhere. People said they was going to ring back and they never did. And then when we rang again, they knew nothing about it. And it was just like English bureaucracy, very, very frustrating indeed. And I found I couldn't do it. I could not do it. And even to this day, I'm still being haunted by that. And trying to resolve that from here in England is even more impossible. It's just impossible. No one wants to speak to anybody from another country. So I'm afraid it goes unresolved. And that's the end of my message today. And sometimes I wonder whether in life, whether we are in hell or whether we are in heaven. And some would say, someone famous once said, it is better to reign in hell than to serve in heaven. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But philosophically, we are all in the same boat, and we all share the same eventual fate. All of us. Which it shouldn't be depressing. It shouldn't be depressing because I'm not a God person, but I'm a spiritual person, and I firmly believe that life doesn't end here. But my video does. Thank you for listening. Give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down, or subscribe, or even comment if you want to. And again, thank you for listening to an old man.